Many people agree with me that Cusco, Peru is an excellent candidate for the city of Nephi. But then they ask, where was the great city of Zarahemla? I answer to them that I believe that it will be found exactly where the Book of Mormon indicates it should be found. I'll explain that in the next 4 series we do on Zarahemla. Part 1. Where was Zarahemla located during Book of Mormon times? Part 2. The geological and climatic evidence for Zarahemla. Part 3. The archaeological evidence that the ruins of Pukara were the city of Zarahemla. And Part 4. How Pukara fits the events recorded in the Book of Mormon. Welcome to another episode of Discovering the Book of Mormon through Science and Exploration. For nearly 300 years, the city of Zarahemla was the capital of the Nephite civilization. Before Mosiah's exodus to Zarahemla, the land had been occupied by the Jaredites and Mulekites. Later, at least by the time of Christ's visitation to the New World, the religious center of the Nephites had moved to Bountiful. So where is there a candidate for Zarahemla in the Andes of Peru? There are 4 reasons why I believe the ruins that archaeologists call Pukara in southern Peru is the likely candidate for Zarahemla. It was once a great city that ruled all of southern Peru. At the time of the visitation of Jesus Christ in the Americas, Pukara was 4 times larger than Jerusalem. First, the Book of Mormon history is largely the account of 2 nations, the Nephites and the Lamanites, warring against one another. Pukara is located just north of Lake Titicaca, and was populated by the Quechua-speaking people who were disliked throughout history by the Amara-speaking people who lived on the opposite end of Lake Titicaca. Pukara fits the Book of Mormon scenario of the warring Nephites and Lamanites, who were separated by a strip of wilderness that stretched between the 2 seas, the Pacific and Lake Titicaca. Second, Pukara came into prominence at around 200 BC, roughly the same time when King Mosiah arrived in Zarahemla and founded a new and prosperous dynasty. Third, Pukara is located 120 miles south of Cusco, which is how Zarahemla was geographically situated in reference to the city of Nephi. Down, in English and Quechua, means south. See Omni 1:13 and Mormon 1:6. Merriam-Webster's dictionary entry, quote, down south, an idiom, definition in or to the southern part of a country or region. Example, we'll be heading down south for the winter. An example of the word down referring to south in the Bible is Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, Genesis 12:10. The words up and down in the Bible also refers to traveling toward, up to the temple, or away from, down from the temple of Jerusalem. Thus, when Mosiah went down to Zarahemla, probably did not refer to a change in altitude, which would have been nearly impossible for him to have measured, but that he traveled south or away from the temple in the city of Nephi. Fourth, the original land of Zarahemla, let's say Pukara, was bordered by the sea on the west, the Pacific, and the sea on the east, Titicaca. The territory from Lake Titicaca to the Pacific Ocean matches the empire of Pukara, which ruled such a territory during the period of Zarahemla. Archaeologist Alan Kalata states of Pukara, however we interpret the nature of Pukara influence outside of its Altiplano core territory, it is evidence that this dynamic Altiplano city was the most powerful and well-integrated political force of its time in the southern Andes. For the first time, with Pukara, we see evidence of a corporate art style in the service of the elite that had extensive impact throughout the Titicaca Basin and the adjoining coastal regions of southern Peru and northern Chile. As Mosiah and his followers fled south from the city of Nephi into the wilderness, they eventually discovered a large community of people called the Mulekites in a land called Zarahemla. The Mulekites left Jerusalem at approximately the same time as Lehi. Thus, for Pukara to have been Zarahemla, the Mulekites would have needed to have settled on the Altiplano northwest of Lake Titicaca, the area where Pukara is located. Pukara was located 150 miles inland from the Pacific. The Book of Mormon tells us that once the Mulekites crossed the waters and landed, they went into the land. Omni 1:16. After their migration inland, the Mulekites remained in the same place. Omni 1:16. Around 49 BC, many Nephites fled from the land of Zarahemla northward, which included the land of desolation. Since we know from Inca tradition that the lands around today's Lima, Peru, was known by the ancient Peruvians as the land of the people of desolation, then Pukara, being south of Lima, would have been located in the right direction from the Book of Mormon land of desolation. Finally, we know that when the Mulekites arrived, they found the land northward covered with the bones of the dead Jaredites, Omni 1:22. Thus, the Jaredite bones in the land of desolation were in the land northward of Zarahemla, where the statement was originally recorded. That is, the land southward. Being located inland and southeast of Lima, Pukara matches the general location of Zarahemla in the Book of Mormon. The existence of the Mulekites raises an interesting question. How could the Mulekites and the Nephites lived in proximity to each other for nearly 400 years without discovering each other? The Pukara model for Zarahemla has a straightforward answer. There are two explanations for the lack of interaction between the Nephites in the city of Nephi, or Cusco, and the Mulekites at Zarahemla, Pukara, approximately 120 miles to the south. First, there were Lamanites to the immediate south of the city of Nephi. Thus, there was an enemy barrier between the Nephites and Mulekites. This appears to have been the same case for the city of Cusco and Pukara, where Aymara-speaking people lived between the Quechua-speaking people of Cusco and the Quechua-speaking people of Pukara. Second, the Book of Mormon indicates that there was a narrow passage between the land northward and the land southward where Zarahemla was located. This passage was a unique feature and should not be confused with the narrow strip of wilderness or the narrow neck of land that's described elsewhere in the Book of Mormon. It appears to have been a narrow passage through the mountains. Zarahemla was located in the land southward. To the north of Zarahemla, in the direction of the city of Nephi, are the mountains called Manti. These mountains form the watershed for the headwaters of the Sidon River, Alma 22:29. This is exactly the case in the Andes, where you have between the city of Cusco and the city of Pukara a vast mountain range that runs east-west, which would have isolated the people from the city of Nephi from Zarahemla. Thus, the Book of Mormon hints that there was a major geological feature between the two civilizations, and if the Lamanites controlled the only narrow passage through the mountains that separated the two civilizations, this would explain why their language and culture took two different routes for nearly 400 years. History has shown how mountains can isolate two groups of people living very close to each other. Having lived in Switzerland, I was amazed to find that the people living in one mountainous canton spoke a different dialect of Swiss German than the people living in the very next canton. Indeed, the Alps virtually isolate peoples and communities living within a few miles of each other. Although the Inca cities of Cusco and Pukara are only 120 miles apart, the two ancient city-states were separated by a range of glacier-topped mountains that towered some 20,000 feet. The only passage through the Vilcanoca Mountains is the La Rea Pass at an altitude of 14,300 feet. Furthermore, the Vilcanoca mountain range, like the Manti mountain range in the Book of Mormon, runs east and west between the two great Andes corridors, and thus forming a massive barrier between the city of Cusco and the city of Pukara. A mountainous terrain between the city of Nephi and the land of Zarahemla would explain why parties that left Zarahemla got lost in their attempt to find the city of Nephi, the land of their first inheritance. In the Book of Mormon, Malachi provides only a brief description of Mosiah's exodus from the city of Nephi to Zarahemla. It reads, "They, Mosiah's people, departed out of the land into the wilderness, as many as would hearken unto the voice of the Lord. And they were admonished continually by the word of God. And they were led by the power of his arm through the wilderness until they came down into the land which was called the land of Zarahemla." To discover Mosiah's trail to Zarahemla, it seems we have only these clues. 1. From the city of Nephi, they entered a wilderness. 2. They traveled through the wilderness. 3. And they came down to the land of Zarahemla. Coming down to Zarahemla could be interpreted in two ways. First, they came south. Down refers to south in both English and Quechua to reach Zarahemla. Second, that they traveled downhill out of the wilderness to reach Zarahemla. During a recent tour to Peru, I explained to our guests how these clues generally match our bus route from Cusco, Peru, our candidate for the city of Nephi, through the massive mountains and then down, south or downhill, to the ruins of Pukara, our candidate for Zarahemla. Approximately halfway through the Andes wilderness south of Cusco, we passed over the La Rea Pass at 14,300 feet above sea level before descending down to Pukara at 12,800 feet above sea level. Amateur linguist Jerry Grover has translated what is called the character document, a small piece of paper that is believed to show Reformed Egyptian characters which Joseph Smith had requested to be written down. The document was recently purchased by the LDS Church from the Community of Christ. While Glover's translation might not hold up against academic scrutiny, interestingly, it is very consistent with the Nephites leaving Cusco, Peru, or the city of Nephi, then traveling through a mountain wilderness, then finding and following the Pukara River or the Sidon River down to Zarahemla. His translation reads, "In the 19th regnal year of Mosiah, the Nephites traveled over the mountains to the foreign-speaking people of Mulek. These 20,000 children of Mosiah traveled down river on the east side of the river Sidon for 8 days and reached Zarahemla." On our tours in Peru, we drive south from Cusco, through and over the mountainous wilderness, reaching the La Rea Pass, and then we drive south or down to the headwaters of the Pukara River or the Sidon River. We follow the east side downriver until the river passes the ruins of Pukara, our candidate for Zarahemla. A company of 20,000 people would move rather slowly. From going over the mountains at the La Rea Pass to the ruins of Pukara would be a distance of 62 miles. This would mean that the Nephites averaged a reasonable distance of just under 8 miles per day to travel down from the Larea Pass to the ruins of Pukara, our candidate for Zarahemla. According to Grover's translations, it would be an 8-day journey. Using this information, this is an AI-generated map of the Peruvian wilderness trail Mosiah's company would have taken. Archaeologists squarely place Pukara in the historical period of Zarahemla. Elizabeth Coleridge from the University of California at Santa Barbara cites the late or upper formative 500 BC to AD 400 is characteristic of the development of the first markedly ranked societies in the region, centered at the sites of Pukara in the northwest basin and Tiwanaku in the southern basin. Not only did the Pukara civilization start at the time of the arrival of the Mulekites, roughly 500 BC, it fell at the time of the demise of the Nephites at 400 AD. Furthermore, no evidence can be found that the city was occupied in the subsequent Middle Horizon period. Coleridge notes of this period. By AD 400, the Pukara polity had collapsed, while Tiwanaku, perhaps the Lamanites on the south side of the lake, continued to grow and reorganize into an urban center, one that developed into the first erratic state in the Titicaca region. In other words, in an altiplano paradigm for Zarahemla, the Nephite society disappeared on the northwest end of Lake Titicaca, circa AD 400, while their enemies, the Lamanites, continued to prosper at Tiwanaku. Archaeologists divide the Pukara civilization into 3 sub-periods that coincide remarkably well with the periods of the Zarahemla civilization that was described in the Book of Mormon. The Mulekite period, roughly 550 to 130 BC, the Nephites, 130 BC to AD 34, and the post-Christ visitation reconstruction period, AD 34 to AD 400. Stedman of UC Berkeley established the Pukara periods as the initial Pukara and the classic Pukara 1, 400 to 100 BC, the classic Pukara period 100 BC to 100 AD, and the late Pukara AD 100 to AD 350. One can scan the entire archaeological record of the Americas, and they will not find ruins that match better Zarahemla than Pukara in Peru. As I mentioned before, the archaeologists do not know the original name for these ruins. I believe it was the city of Zarahemla, and I'll explain why in the next 3 videos in this series. Thank you for watching this presentation, and please subscribe to this channel. You can find our books and learn about our tours by visiting our website, christinperu.com. That's one word. Thank you again.